When the world becomes quiet enough, the first thing you hear may not come from the world at all. A door closes, the ventilation fades, traffic disappears behind thick walls. For a few seconds, there is almost nothing. Then you notice your breathing. A small click in your jaw, a faint electrical hum, maybe a thin, high tone with no obvious source. The room has become quieter, yet your hearing feels busier. Why? The first answer is simple. Silence does not remove every sound. It removes the sounds that were covering the others. Even a quiet room usually contains a low carpet of noise. Distant engines, pipes, fans, appliances, footsteps, wind, voices through walls. Most of it never reaches conscious attention. Louder signals bury weaker ones before they become important. This is masking. A weak sound can still be present, while another sound makes it almost impossible to notice. Think of a candle flame at noon. The flame has not vanished. Sunlight simply overwhelms it. At night, the same flame suddenly looks bright. Near silence does that to hearing. It removes the acoustic daylight. An anechoic chamber makes the change almost physical. Its walls absorb reflections, so a clap seems to die where it began. Without the usual echo, the room feels strangely flat. Then the listener becomes the most active thing inside it. A breath has shape. A swallow has weight. Fabric moves against skin. None of these sounds suddenly became louder. The scale changed. Signals that once sat beneath the surrounding world rose toward the top. The room did not create them. It stopped hiding them. But extreme quiet changes more than the environment. You start listening. Attention narrows. A sound that would normally be dismissed is suddenly treated like evidence. Even the question, "Do you hear anything?" changes the experience because it tells the brain what kind of signal to search for. Attention can improve the detection of weak sounds. A soft pulse, hum, or click becomes easier to notice when the auditory system is actively waiting for one. But that sensitivity creates a trade-off. If the brain becomes more willing to accept weak evidence as a possible sound, it can catch signals it would otherwise miss. It can also become more likely to treat uncertain activity as meaningful. The same sensitivity that helps you notice a real click can make an ambiguous one harder to dismiss. You may have felt this while waiting for someone late at night. Once you expect the door, every floorboard becomes a possible footstep. Most of those sounds were always there. Expectation did not create them, but it changed how quickly they were promoted from background noise into possible evidence. Now the problem becomes stranger. The brain is not a microphone. It does not receive a perfect recording of reality. It receives incomplete electrical activity and has to decide what caused it. Was that vibration a pipe in the wall, a muscle near the ear, a distant vehicle, or activity inside the hearing system itself? In an ordinary room, there are clues. You can turn your head. Compare when the sound reaches each ear and how loud it is on each side. Reflections help reveal the shape of the room. You may see a moving object or hear the sound repeat. In deep quiet, those clues may disappear. The signal can be weak, brief, and difficult to locate. Yet the brain still has to answer two questions. Is there a sound, and where did it come from? A signal can pass the first test while leaving the second still completely unresolved. This is where hearing things becomes misleading. At first, the answer may be the room, a pipe, a floorboard, a distant machine. Then it may be the body, breath, blood flow, a joint, a muscle close to the ear. But sometimes there is no matching sound wave outside the listener. A tone, buzz, hiss, or ring is still genuinely experienced, even when no external source can be found. Tinnitus is the best known example, although a brief tone in silence does not automatically mean chronic tinnitus. More rarely, the brain may organize uncertain activity into something more complex, such as music, speech, or a sound that seems to carry meaning. Silence does not make everyone hear voices. Short periods of quiet do not automatically cause hallucinations, but one experiment shows how much attention can matter. Participants sat in the same quiet booth, but were given different tasks. Some focused on visual information. Others were told to listen carefully. The room was equally quiet for everyone. Yet hallucinatory-like reports appeared in about 6% of the visual group, and roughly 36% of the group focused on hearing. That does not mean a third of people will hallucinate in a quiet room. It was one controlled experiment with a specific task and a limited group. But the contrast reveals something important. What changed was not the room. It was what their attention had been told to find. Other experiments in dark, extremely quiet rooms have found the same general pattern. When normal hearing participants actively listen, many report simple tones, buzzing, hissing, or humming. The point is not that silence manufactures sound from nothing. The setting is unusual, and expectation is part of the experiment. The point is that removing external sound does not leave the hearing system inactive. It makes internal and ambiguous activity easier to notice. Attention can then push that activity closer to conscious perception, and the brain keeps doing more than noticing. It tracks patterns, compares signals, estimates sources, predicts what is likely to happen next. Listen to a steady rhythm, and your auditory system begins preparing for the next beat. If that beat fails to arrive, the absence itself can trigger a response. The brain is not only reacting to sounds, it is also reacting to missing sounds. That does not mean expectation can invent anything it wants. Real sensory evidence still matters, but perception is always a decision made from incomplete evidence. And the weaker the evidence becomes, the harder that decision is. Imagine trying to identify someone through fog. In clear air, the face supplies most of the answer. In heavy fog, posture, memory, expectation, and context matter more. You may still recognize the person correctly. You may also briefly mistake a stranger for someone you know. Near silence is acoustic fog. There is less information coming from outside, but the hearing system keeps searching, comparing, and interpreting. A weak internal signal can now receive more weight because less external evidence is competing with it. That is why extreme quiet can feel surprisingly crowded. The mechanism is not one mysterious effect. It is a shift in balance. External noise stops covering weak signals. Attention turns toward what remains. Clear clues about the source disappear. Internal activity that normally stays below awareness can cross into it. The world contributes less, but perception does not stop. Silence can reveal a real sound the world was covering. It can expose activity inside the body or auditory system. And under unusual conditions, it can make uncertain signals vivid enough to be experienced as sounds. Not because the brain automatically fills every quiet room with imaginary noise, because the leftover evidence now has more weight. This reveals something larger about perception. We often imagine that the senses simply deliver whatever exists outside us, but every sensation is already a selection. Most signals are ignored. Some are amplified. Ambiguous ones are interpreted. Even the absence of an expected event can become meaningful. So when a quiet room begins to hum, click, ring, or breathe, the most useful question is not simply, is that sound real? The experience is real. The better question is, which part of the hearing process has become visible? Sometimes it is the room. Sometimes it is the body. Sometimes it is activity inside the auditory system. And sometimes the source remains uncertain. Silence does not remove perception. It gives the leftover signals the entire stage.